comments section is, where it used to say cell phone. Last time I put major, this time I say first choice for career. So if you don't know, just say no idea, or just put a question mark. But if I had a magic wand, even if you haven't decided to do it, if I had a magic wand, you could be so skilled and licensed and certified and educated in that thing, and that's what you would be doing. Doesn't mean you have to do it your whole life. It's what would be your ideal, like the crescendo of your whole career, what you be or do. Okay? Let's pray and we'll get right into it today. So we got a lot to cover, and it's truncated. How you doing, sir? Let's pray. Father in heaven, there are many things that overlap with many other things, and those overlap to different degrees with still other things, and it becomes confusing, and it's hard to know which one of those things to focus on when. And I pray that you will help us to be still and to be able in our mind and in our heart, as needed, to put one thing at a time in front of us and consider it when that's the best way. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to go straight to conceptualizing spirituality again, and specifically Christian spirituality, and more specifically Seventh-day Adventist Christian spirituality. That's a subset of a subset of a subset of a subset of, and that goes on for a long time. And I'm going to try to put that into context. Just a housekeeping item, though, just a process item. Please don't, you're good. If we get a place, we do. We have multiple choices. You get 3 places in our, yeah, I was right, 3 places. Now we have 2. A process thing. On your syllabus, if you're not tracking with it, please track with it. It will get overwhelming. Because reading through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Steps to Christ, and the book Thirsty for God, for just one class, is doable, but it should be a bit of a stretch to do that much reading thoughtfully for just one class when you have 4 other classes, or 3 or 5 or whatever other classes. It should be a stretch. It should be a stretch. I mean, otherwise college, if you're not stretching, is like kind of going to the gym and finding an empty bar and always lifting empty bars. You know, you do your dumbbell work with the plates all off, and just and then you pose a little and head out and shower. You haven't really worked out. You know, or it's like doing all of your aerobics like by walking downhill. This is not, you're not growing. And you're here to grow. You're not here to just get a license to do your job. You think maybe that you are, because, gosh, I just want to be a nurse. If I could just blow off school and just start being a nurse, then you'll, because it's a liberal arts school, hopefully you will, if you have that attitude now, hopefully there will come a time, unless you have some sort of arrested development and you don't mature as people normally do. Unless that happens, you will come to a point, whether you have or not, where this broad kind of contextualizing liberal arts education, you'll start going, gee, I wish I could go back and do that for 20 more years. If I could have a timeout. Well, why didn't I just really put, I mean, that was more important than the career skills. I wish I could, I mean, that happens. You know, it doesn't happen to everybody, but I'm going to say really frankly, when that doesn't happen and you never come to a point where you appreciate some context for life and everything, it's kind of like you didn't mature the rest of the way. So I'm hoping that everybody here is on track to at least eventually cash in on what we're doing, not just here, but in your English 101 class, and in your, if you're not a science major, your sort of science for poets courses and that sort of thing. It all really matters. History and psychology and music and art and everything. It helps you after you get where you're going. Okay, so you're a nurse. Now you've been a nurse for 15 years. have the same responsibilities you did the first day you started. Pretty much like they told you it would be, not exactly, but almost, in school. And then, so what? Then you start asking things about why and what else and that sort of thing. Then, if you don't have anything else to draw on, it's kind of vacuous, empty. So it matters, the context matters. This course has a context, and we're going to try to establish that. The reading that's set up for the course in the reading schedule in the syllabus, the schedule of assignments to come to class, having read that by the time you get here, by the end of this week, you should have read, 2 chapters in Steps to Christ and the first chapter of Thirsty for God. Is that correct? Plus some passages. Now, those are mixed up. Those passages look like they're mixed up, but they kind of go in numerical order, but not exactly. What they go by is one scheme. It happens to be the scheme in the volume of the Seventh-day Adventist Bible commentary set that deals with the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In the introductory material, the front matter of that commentary volume, there are lots of schemes and maps and the timetables for Jesus' ministry and all that, but one of the most valuable pieces in there is a list that has 179 items on the list. 179 items. Those 179 items are the only units of a thing that we have that Jesus said or did. 179 things. One of those could be the announcement of his birth to Mary, the announcement of his birth to, Jesus' actual birth, the flight to Egypt, the return from Egypt, the coming of wise men, the calling the disciples, those kinds of things. But then some of them are long. Like one of them is the Sermon on the Mount, which has got, that you could get your PhD on a portion of the Sermon on the Mount and all that it has done through history and all that it means and historic and cultural background to that one thing, how it relates to every other passage in Scripture before it and after it. It's just, you'd never run out from just that. But just so that there's some sort of taxonomy, so that there's some sort of indexing, imagine trying to find a home here in Angwin. Someone says, I live out in the community. Not really on a hill, not really in a valley, but just sort of on a flat stretch. Come see me. It's Angwin. It's a small town. It's not that big. You can find me. You meet somebody in Napa when you're going out to eat and you say, I'm going to go to your house. They say, okay, we're going to a movie. Oh, okay. But they don't give you the street and they don't give you the house number. So you're goofed. Now, the name of the street is sort of an arbitrary thing. They could have named it differently, and sometimes what they do is the street comes to another street, and then they just rename it from that. You've seen that, haven't you? Or sometimes it doesn't even, it'll just turn a little bit of a corner, and then it becomes a different street. But that's it. It's arbitrary. There's no God-given thing. It didn't come to Moses on Sinai or anything like that. It didn't get discovered with a scanning electron microscope, and that's part of the fundamentals of matter. It's nothing like that. It's just to give it a name. The name you have, I clarified 3 people's names, how they pronounce their last, or what he wants to be called for his first name and that sort of thing. You could have been named anything, but you happen to be named this, and so we're going by that by convention, by agreement. So these 179 things, that's not sacred. It might involve, it's a way of describing some very sacred things, but it's not a sacred thing. It's just one way. I just committed to that years ago so that I reference in my mind, for instance, that just for example, items, or they call them events 70 through 80 happen to deal with the retirement from public ministry of Jesus. Okay? And that way I know what events happened in there. I know which one of those events happened during that period. And I know for the 8 periods in Jesus' life, I know the dates. So I know where to put it and where he was when I think about a certain event. I have gone through and put the readings for the course from the Gospels in the order of those 179 things on the list, the way that it's indexed in the Adventist Bible Commentary. There's other systems. Different people disagree about whether or not certain events are the same event that's told from a different perspective, or whether they're completely separate events. For the most part, the Seventh-day Adventist scheme tries to synthesize with the Desire of Ages. So what Ellen White says, even in there or in other books that have implications, the things they say for the events, like Thoughts for the Mount of Blessing, for instance. The scheme can be debatable, and you can find other harmonies of the Gospels. They call that when you try to put all the passages from each four together for each story unit or whatever. So this is, I'm not claiming that this is the only way to look at it. I'm saying this is closer to the traditional Adventist way to chronologize, to put in order and clustered events as they happen in time. Please try not to get behind in them in the reading. Now, when we discuss something from the life of Christ or a teaching that he gave, I'm not going to always be careful to give you the scripture reference, and we're not going to look it up every single time like good junior Sabbath school Bible warriors with our sword. That's a good thing to do. It's good to know where that is and where to find it easily. And I'm actually going to recommend a ridiculously ambitious task to you. I'm not going to require it, of course, but I'm going to recommend that you not only know where to find everything in those 4 books, but between now and forever, that you make it your progressing ambition to cold, hard memorize all 4 Gospels. Flat out, to memorize all 4 Gospels. I mean, so that if I said, what's John 3:16, which most of you or many of you could say, oh, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life, right? But that you'd be able to do that with verse 17, and you'd be able to do that with John 4, verse 1, and that you'd be able to give me what's the last verse in the Gospels, just like you could just do that, and that it would be, you'd know it better than you know your social security number or the way that you look in the mirror when you look there, that it would be like catchy songs that become an earworm, that you'd have texts that would become earworms involuntarily. You'd be doing stuff and they would just run themselves, that you know it that intimately, like some song you can't get out of your head. The reason for that is we all, each of us, we have vastly more in our memory of cold, hard, memorized facts and verse than all of the material in Scripture. We all do. We have more data that we have solidly memorized than what's in there. But if anybody actually believes any of the model of doing life well and spiritually and religiously or whatever, that says that Jesus is the example of how to be human, the best example ever of how to be human, especially if you believe that Jesus really was God who got born as a human, demonstrating how to be human, then beyond those 4 books, what do we have that comes anywhere close to the category even of significance to have in our minds, in our database? But we have volumes and volumes of memorized crap that's in there, and that's not even memorized. Crap memorized. Gospels, if I get a concordance, I can sometimes, if I remember the story, I can look something. if it's not interesting anyway, if you go, well, actually, I don't even, okay, I believe that Jesus is probably one example of a good guy, but I just as soon look at the, what Buddha had to say or whatever. Okay, I can't argue that with you. That's your pursuit. But if your pursuit has anything to do with Christianity, or you believe, even if you're not religious, but you believe Jesus was like the ultimate example of spirituality, and that Jesus is actually God, then I would say give some real consideration to what would be a reasonable amount of time every day to set aside, like, as maybe one of the most important things of your whole day, any day, to working on memorizing hard and permanently, word for word. And knowing even the organizational schemes, give that some serious thought. I doubt that there's very many things any of us could do that would have the power to shape our character to be like Christ on sort of an ongoing daily basis, besides committing that very short collection of recorded sayings, teachings, and deeds of Jesus. So that's why I'm introducing it by saying, let's at least have all read through it. Don't skip it. When you finish, you can say, I read the Gospels entirely. Oh, actually, there's a couple of things that are left out. So you don't have all 179. But I involve those in my reading and in my memory work and everything too. And I would recommend them because they have a purpose. They do make some points. They're important to understand. And that's the ancestry tables, the genealogy, the ancestry.com stuff on Jesus that's in there. I didn't put the genealogies in, but pretty much everything else is in those verses. I think that's all that I eliminated was the two Gospels that have the genealogy of Jesus. Okay? Now, in terms of spirituality, is there any difference between spirituality, the word, the term, the concept, the category of spirituality, and that of religion? Are there people that are spiritual, but they aren't religious?
Yes.
Yeah. Are there people who are religious, but they're really not spiritual?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So let's do sort of we'll start a Venn diagram system here. Okay. I'm not suggesting the percentage of things that would go in either side, but just so that the relationship is clear, let's call this religion, and let's call this spirituality. All right? This is, in my opinion, this is a pretty good place to be. Okay? There are some advantages to having a portion of your spirituality overlap with your religion. If you're going to be religious, I think it's really important to have as much as possible overlapping. You could have all of it overlapping, I suppose. Maybe that's impractical. But working on having this be the biggest area if you're going to be religious. Now, if it's this way, then I'm not sure that I'm going to enjoy religious fellowship with you as much as with some people or benefit from it in any significant way. In fact, you're probably, if you're like those two circles on top, you in whatever context you do your religion, you're probably hurting other people's spirituality. You're part of the problem, and you'd be probably better for everyone else if you weren't even there. All right? Because this means that you've got lots of other things besides spirituality that probably are overlapping with it, like business, law, power, judgment of others. You got a whole lot of other stuff. Now, you might have some okay stuff too. This one might be like pro-sociality, helping others. And that might, you might do some things that help other people in a religious context, but still not from any spiritual involvement. And then whatever part of you is spiritual, you also do some stuff to kind of help, but you don't talk about that at church, like you send money to one of these organizations that educates and houses and clothes children in countries where there's been a lot of refugees and war and all that kind of thing. Compassion International or something like that. You don't, in fact, you might say, well, I don't talk about that at church because it's not an Adventist place, and I don't, but I do that privately because I just want to. But in your religious thing, it's like, well, that has nothing to do with spirituality because I'm worried about that spirituality stuff when it comes to, I don't do that on Sabbath. I don't do that stuff on Sabbath. Like, oh yeah, someone taught me how to meditate, be mindful and everything, but that's not really Adventisty, so I don't do that in an Adventist context. I don't even do that on Sabbath, But sometimes at work, I do these things because I'm just being polite, and there's a Buddhist that sits next to me or whatever. So you could have it going on. But what if a person had almost no S? They had almost none. It was just like vacuous spiritually. So in order to even conceptualize that, what is this spirituality as distinct from religion? It doesn't have to be kept distinct, but just conceptually, when we even say things like that, what do you think of when I say, well, spirituality and religion, people can be spiritual but not religious. They can be religious but not spiritual. What are you thinking of is spirituality? Anyone?
Internal connection to their source of their faith, whatever that is.
Internal, intrinsic, inside them, right? Connection to whatever the source of their faith is, their divinity, awe for the universe, if you're Carl Sagan or whatever. Oh, well, okay. Relationship. But you can kind of go to church and kind of not be into the relationships there or something.
Well, then a real relationship.
The real relationship, authenticity of relationship. Is that what you're, okay, very good. A deeper understanding of the unknown, the mystery. It's interesting because in the Native American terminology, we'll see this in chapter 1. Some of you have already looked at chapter 1. In some Native American forms, especially the Lakota peoples, the Great Spirit, hope it goes well, take care. The Great Spirit, the Great God Spirit, take care. Yeah, I gotta go because he's going. Yours is helpful. Okay. Okay. And then anyone else? Oh yeah, them. I'm going. The Great Spirit, and so's Kelly. And so's Kelly. What?
Sound.
On your sound, what are you? He's drums. Why did I suspect that? Hey, Kelly. You know what they call people that hang around with musicians? Drummer. What? Can you what?
Answer real quick.
Can you answer? Yes.
Spirituality is what I find meaning.
It's where you find meaning. Okay. It's where you find meaning.
I feel like religion is sometimes something you're taught, and spirituality is something you find.
Spirituality is something, religion is something you're taught. Spirituality is something you find on your own. That's an interesting construct. I've never thought of it that way before. I'm going to think about that. I bet a lot of people have that. I bet that you're not alone in that. Anyway, this Lakota, I'll be right there. This Lakota word that is translated into English, the Great Spirit, if you would break that down with people from the Lakota tribe or the Sioux tribe, whose word is very similar, it actually translates equally well as the Great Mystery. So that mystery concept. Yes?
Attempting to understand the supernatural.
Attempting to understand the supernatural. Okay, so something you perceive is different than the rest of like physical realm, that, and you're trying to understand stuff that you can't measure with science.
Yeah, except like without being religious, because I feel like.
Without being religious. Okay, so in your mind, they are not overlapping concepts, religion and spirituality.
No, I think they are.
They
but
are.
I think that people who are trying to be spiritual without religion are, attempting to understand something that
Okay.
can't be understood without it.
Good point.
So,
Yeah.
sort of piggybacking off of what she said, I think, I was reading for another class in John 1:33, and John the Baptist is talking to the people around him, and he's saying, like, I baptize in water,
Right, right.
but Jesus,
He's baptized in
In
the
the Holy
Spirit and the
Spirit.
truth, right.
and it's like, so he's the one that can give this gift. So I view it as a gift,
Mm-hmm.
and I see where it can be misconstrued.
Okay.
And so I'm worried for myself how I can receive that from the source.
Okay, so,
So I want to be a balance, but I want to make sure
why
I've
would
got
you
good
want to
balances.
balance those things?
Because I want to be able to,
Get a job?
well, not only that, but
Because if you want to get a job as a pastor, you better figure out how to balance those things, and it better look a lot like the people hiring you.
yeah, and for where I'm at right now in life, I think both sides are important, and I do believe that maybe being born Seventh Adventist and going down this road, I've probably been able to be better on the R side, even though I haven't attained any perfection there whatsoever. But I think I've been taught that more,
Right?
and there is a fuzziness about the S side that I know I need,
Sure.
but I know I need the right stuff, and
Yes.
sometimes I don't know how to distinguish, clearly
Okay.
in our world the right stuff.
Okay. Yes.
I think spirituality is more on a individual basis,
Okay.
And-
Individual.
and religion is more like, it could be organized as a community, as,
A collective.
collective community.
Okay.
and
It's when we put our
like
when we put our
doctrines and-
efforts together in our
Yeah.
spirituality, and then it takes on an organism shape
Yeah.
of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, in one sense, I think it might be possible that there's over 7 billion religions in the world.
Okay.
I mean that completely differently than what you said, because I see it the way you see it also, in terms of the individuality, the collectivity. And those concepts, for me, have not been really that distinct most of my life. And I only kind of evaluate it for academic purposes as distinct, because what I do instead is go to church and then just be grouchy when other people are acting what I consider unspiritual. And so that's how I'm the judge,
I've always viewed spirituality and religion as like spirituality is internal and religion is external.
Oh, good. Internal, external. That's a good distinction. Something that's going on in the part of you that other people can't directly experience in your private you. Yes? And at least the private you part that doesn't mean you have to move any body parts. Is that?
Yeah.
Very good. And by the way, the reason that the term spirit has become this idea of spirituality is that it blends, it kind of goes like this from multiple cultures to go into the concept from the cultures feeding the Latin world where the term spirit was first used. But there's a couple of words in Hebrew that are used. One of them is for the breath, and one of them is for the soul. And we get from the Greek our word for psychology, the psyche, is the soul or mind, the part that you would describe as that part of you that is private, inside part, the mind part. It doesn't seem to be like an arm or a finger bone or anything like that, or a toe or nail or anything. Yes.
You can see spirituality as a muscle that needs to be exercised, and religion as a gym you choose to exercise.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Just the way that mind.
Yeah. opportunities to grow that muscle. Like you could join a health club and you could go there and stand at the drinking fountain the whole time and dig the tunes. And you could leave just as physically as you arrive, right? You take a shower, a long shower after you go around going, oh yeah, kind of spot you once in a while. And you get some dumbbells and run around like you're gonna do something and then put them back when you're sure everyone's seen them and when you can't hold them anymore. But you're not really training. So you could go to church and do that. Or you could go to a church, like you go to a gym that has no gear. It doesn't even have enough floor space. Somebody didn't even have, the building before was a little takeout restaurant. There wasn't even a place for a table, And so they go, oh, let's turn it into a gym. And so you put some posters up, you have some hand grip devices, and a jump rope, and you get there and you go, this is not at all what I expected. We don't have one of those. We're here to encourage you. But you don't. And they say, no, we don't believe in a lot of iron, pump iron, you get big ugly muscles. It's not very aesthetic. And, here's a razor, maintain yourself. And that'll do. You go, oh, this is a funky gym, right? So maybe some churches can be like that. You go there and it's like, oh no, I'm out. Did you hear me?
Oh, sure. No, but I think I've always kind of viewed religion more as a kind of a control mechanism, whereas
Okay.
spirituality to me has always been kind of the experience of truth and more of like a liberating mechanism.
So you've experienced it kind of as a controlling thing.
Yeah, I guess in my life I've kind of seen them as separately, two different things where I think there are like positive overlaps in between, but
Okay.
for the most part I have seen them as more separate.
That's important. What you just said is important. All the stuff you've been saying, all of you, is important. But in our last couple of minutes together, I want to stem from that a little bit. One of the things that's on, well, let's talk about two of the things that are on the topic list in terms of Seventh Day Adventist spirituality. One of them is the Sabbath, and another one is this notion of keeping the morning watch. If you ever in Pathfinders and did I will keep the morning watch. Thoughtful hour in the morning, doing your devotions, doing your devotions. Now, you could approach either or both of those activities as things, as concepts, Sabbath and having worship or whatever in spiritual time or whatever in the morning. You can approach those from either one of those constructs, like, oh gosh, I gotta do this. That means I'm not allowed to. Now, what I want to do Saturday is, but I can't because I'm made to, and then you internalize that, and it's like, oh, I can't do that because God says I'm gonna go to hell or something if I do, so I can't do that. So, and oh shoot, I've got to spend. It bores the snot out of me. But I'm gonna still read the stupid devotional book, or read Amos or something, and I spend the hour, and it's like, gosh, well, if I have to go to the bathroom during that time, yes, I have to go to the bathroom, my bladder's full, yes. Can I leave the timer running? Take my time in the bathroom, gotta go, and then I gotta get ready, so it's all the time I got. Okay, come back, only got 12 minutes left. Good, I spent 40 of that in the bathroom. I hate doing this. And people go, well, I know, but you hate doing some stuff. It's like going to the gym, or it could be thought of the other way, it could be approached the other way around. You see both things, Sabbath and actually morning spiritual time in the life of Christ. But you see it you see it from the other side. He was immersed in a culture, he was thrown into a culture when he was born, where people were externalizing, usually, all these things. And they were like have-tos. They were very Adventisty. They were very much like when Adventism is past the expiration date for somebody, in their like religious refrigerators, like, don't trace that, pour it out. And it really didn't sit very well with the folk in his day when they saw how he related to the Sabbath. He did stuff that violated what they said was the go to hell stuff if you do it, and encouraged his followers to do the same. And then he got up when it was still nighttime because he was so eager to spend his communion time entirely from the other side of the fence that you erected. Okay? Have a wonderful day. We will see you Friday. Don't forget any of the readings by this